Well, I actually finally caught a crappie. They've been real finicky here today, but we're doing pretty good out here. That is a little slow with the cold weather, but this is an example of a size crappie that I'd like to keep on this particular body of water. Did a video here a couple of weeks ago on selective harvest and how important that can be. Eating fish is obviously not a dirty word. These crappies are wonderful. On this particular lake, that's the size we like to keep. I would say anywhere from 7 at the smallest on up to 11 inches is what I like to keep on this particular lake. There's a lot of fish in that size range. The upper end of the size range is 14, 15 inches. We want to keep it that way. Years ago, you actually could catch some bigger ones out here. But the video that I did a few weeks ago, it was talking about the importance of saving, preserving prime genetics. So you can get those bigger fish, the faster growing fish that tend to be more aggressive. That's how they get to be faster growing. So therefore, people generally catch them. And if you don't practice selective harvest, you're not going to protect those genetics. So essentially what we do is that upper end of the range, again here for crappies, it's 12 to 15 inches. We let all of those go. And then the other point that I made with the selective harvest is trying to actually see fish that exhibit those characteristics of a real fast-growing fish. In other words, they look fatter, they look stouter, the heads look smaller. So if you catch a fish in the size range that you normally keep, whether it's pike crappie or whatever it is, if it looks like one of those real healthy, fast-growing fish, then you choose to put that fish back in the lake. So overall, the reaction to the video that I had was extremely positive. Most people said, yeah, Pete, that's the right way to do it, and we got to talk more about that. And you definitely got to preserve those genetics because we all want to catch bigger fish in a body of water, and we want to preserve that because we've seen a lot of cases historically where the average size of the panfish especially have dropped, possibly pike and all different species. This can happen. So the one thing that I really want to address today is that there were some people that were somewhat negative, and by negative I mean they weren't negative on the idea of preserving the genetics, but they were negative from the aspect of, some pointed out, netting, spearing, some Native American or otherwise, where, well, basically people were doing a lot of over-harvest. Bad mentors in a lot of cases. One person pointed out that, well, you know, some of these poor kids, they've got, you know, a bad example from their father, their mentor, grandfather, whatever it might be. The examples are they're keeping, killing everything, so that kid doesn't have a chance, so why should we bother? Well, to a certain extent, I understand that. If it seems like there's too much harvest going on, you let a fish go and somebody else keeps it and catches it, you feel like you haven't accomplished something. Maybe if you're a hunter, you know, a small buck, you let it go, it walks by, somebody else shoots it, you haven't accomplished something. To a certain extent, that's true. But the only way to make it work right is to continue to do it and continue to preach it. And I would argue that even though there's some reasons to think that you're wasting your time by doing that, I would argue that you're right but you're wrong, and that you really need to kind of take it a person at a time and be positive about it. And that's the key, is a person at a time, and then just using the common sense aspects. We tend to, unfortunately, especially with social media these days, we tend to take the real negative route when we see something we don't like. It might be a picture of just too many fish out on the ice. You think, you know, that guy's a slob. And what do? You holler at him. You holler at people for bad holds, blood, this, that, and the other. We tend to be very negative. Let's just, you know, and I'm guilty of it. Everybody's guilty of it. But we got to look at the positive aspect of it, one person at a time, and always just use common sense. That's the key. That's what got me years ago. When I started muskie fishing and guiding as a teenager, we kept every one in those days. I remember it never even crossed my mind in my head at all to let a muskie go because nobody else had done it that I knew or talked to. Well, finally one day, a fella that I worked construction for, he actually realized how into muskies I was, and lo and behold, he said, "Pete, did you ever think about releasing one?" I said, "No." He said, "Do you like to catch bigger muskies?" I said, "Yeah, I'd love to catch bigger muskies." he said, well, if you let these muskies go and they get older, they'll get bigger, and then you could, and as dumb as it might sound, I had never considered that, right? And I obviously went on to catch and release muskies and push for selective harvest and a lot of things, but just understand that the common sense aspects of it with a lot of people they may not have thought of. And I think most people are going to understand selective harvest if you pointed out to them the common sense aspects of it. And even if the kid has had some real bad examples they've dealt with, if you put a common sense point like that out to them, you'll be surprised how many of them you can change. So keep practicing selective harvest.